So our podcast is now on syndicated radio, and we're on 233 radio stations nationwide. And so the Friday podcast that we just recorded will be picked up on Saturdays and Sundays in stations all over the country. The show we just recorded was an entire show remembering Charlie Kirk. Charlie was a good friend of mine. It was a hard show to do. I met Charlie 13 years ago when he was an 18-year-old kid. And I met him in the living room of my dear friend Allie Hanley down in Florida. And he was this kid out of Chicago, never graduated from college, and he had this vision. He had this vision that we can energize young people, we can inspire young people. We can lead them to love liberty, to love the Constitution, to love America, to love Jesus. And I gotta say, at the time, look, 13 years ago, Barack Obama was in the White House. The left was cool. The idea that college kids would suddenly be attracted by conservative principles was viewed as an out there concept. And this kid, Charlie Kirk, he had a vision. He had courage. He was bold. He would go to college campuses. He'd be berated by leftists. And I'll tell you, look, the media has been characterizing him as some sort of extremist. He was the exact opposite of that. And in fact, he would go to people who disagree with him and he'd listen to them. And he'd listen to them with compassion, and he'd treat them with respect, and he'd treat them with dignity. And they would respond with facts and reason and logic and history. And it was powerful. And I'll tell you, I don't know how many of y'all knew Charlie, but I'll tell you this. He was a Christian and he loved Jesus. And he was a powerful defender of Christ. I played on my podcast a segment of an interview with Charlie where he was asked recently, what would you want to be remembered for? And his response is, if I died? And he said, I'd want to be remembered for my courage and my faith. And I think he got his wish. Tell you, I played on the podcast a clip. Recently, Charlie was on Bill Maher. And Charlie was explaining the gospel to Bill Maher. Now listen, I know Bill. Bill is a very smart man, but he's not a Christian. He is an atheist. He is proudly an atheist, and he mocks faith of any kind. And Charlie and Bill have a conversation about the phrase, he is risen. They will have been around Easter. And Bill comments how strange it is that that phrase is in the present tense. He is risen, not he was risen. And Charlie, for a minute and a half, has the most winsome explanation that he is risen because he is risen today. This is a fact in my life today. It's not just an historical fact 2,000 years ago. It is present for your life. That's powerful. And he said that not just to Bill Maher, but to the millions of people who watch his shows. You know, Charlie, his husband, a beautiful wife, Erica, and two little kids, age 1 and 4. Those little kids are never going to know their dad. They're going to grow up without a father in their life. Because of the anger and the hate and the evil that is in this world. And look, if ever there was a week that screams out, we need God. I'm grateful for Charlie's legacy. And I will tell you, The parallels are eerie to the attempted assassination of President Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania. Another gunman on another roof with another rifle. And had the president's head been 2 inches to the side, President Trump would have been killed that day. I shared, look, I was not alive when JFK was killed, or Bobby Kennedy was killed, or Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. But I kind of wonder if that's what it felt like. As you're watching and just going, what is happening to our country? I ended the podcast playing Bobby Kennedy, calling for national unity after Martin Luther King had been shot. And I do hope that some of the legacy of Charlie is just remembering who we are. Look, he was a voice, he was a father and a husband, and he was a voice to young people. I probably spoke at a dozen Turning Point conferences. You go to a Turning Point conference, it was like a rock concert. You'd have lights and fireworks and fire shooting from the ground, and you'd come out with roaring music, and you'd see thousands and thousands of high school kids and college kids energized and excited. I'll read you, I actually read this on the podcast. I'm going to read you a text from a friend of mine. A friend named Dan, who was in California, he sent me a text today. He said, I first met Charlie at your Deer Valley retreat in October 2015. I was so impressed and taken by his vision of bringing conservative values to college campuses that I was an early funder and introduced him to many others who had greater capacity than me. I mentored him until his knowledge exceeded my own. And I saw him reshape the political balance, particularly, but not exclusively, with the under-30s. Looking back at his evangelism, his courage to go to the very heart of the evil that afflicts and brainwashes our youth, and to give those souls hope, I'm wondering this morning if he may have been a saint. Not in the sense he was perfect, as none of us are, but because God moved through him, and he was the vehicle God chose. And then he quotes from Jeremiah. Then the word of the Lord came to me, saying, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I sanctified you. I ordained you a prophet to the nations. Then said I, Ah, Lord God, behold, I cannot speak, for I am a youth. But the Lord said to me, do not say I am a youth, for you shall go to all to whom I send you, and whatever I command you, you shall speak. The text ends with, God bless our brother in Christ, Charlie. Thank you for bringing me into his orbit. As I said, this is a tough time. But it's also a time to be grateful. Be grateful, number one, because we know where Charlie is.
Yes.
And grateful, number two, because we have the opportunity to stand up, speak the truth, and spread the gospel. And our nation is screaming at us that they need to hear it. So I just want to say to all of you, thank you. What you do matters. It makes a difference. You know, last week in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, we were hearing testimony from a number of President Trump's nominees to the State Department. And I came into the hearing room when Tim Kaine, the senator from Virginia, was questioning the witnesses. And one of the witnesses had said, testimony that our rights come not from government, but from God. And Tim Kaine began going off at length about how that was a radical and extreme idea. That was a dangerous idea, he said. He said, that's what countries like Iran are built on, not America. And he said, you are a dangerous nominee because you believe our rights come from God. Now, I was questioning shortly after Tim, and I'll admit I had a totally different line of questions that I planned to ask, and I just threw it all away. And I said, look, I sat down and heard the questions Tim was asking, and I almost fell out of my chair. Because what he characterized as a radical and dangerous idea is literally the founding principle upon which the United States of America was created. Amen. And I said in the hearing, listen, if you don't believe me, maybe you will believe another very famous Virginian, Thomas Jefferson, who wrote perfectly, we hold these truths to be self-evident. So clear, anyone would know, self-evident, we all know this to be true. That all men are created equal. That they are endowed by their Creator. Not government, not the DNC. By their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That is in the opening words of the Declaration of Independence. And the notion that government creates rights has it exactly backwards. And our Declaration explained that governments are there to preserve those rights, to protect those rights, but the rights come from God.
That's right.
Amen.
That's right.
And the Declaration says when the government stops protecting those rights, then the people are justified to rise up and replace the government.
Amen.
Yes.
That's right.
And I gotta say, what troubled me, I like Tim Kaine. He's not some fringe figure in the Democrat Party. He was Hillary Clinton's vice presidential nominee in 2016. He came within inches of being the vice president of the United States. Tim was elected in 2012, the same time I was. We came into the Senate together. He's a smart man, he's a decent man, he's an honorable man. And what was so disturbing was how casually he said, well, of course we don't think our rights come from God. Of course they come from government. And by the way, and what was so troubling is that is what virtually every one of my Democrat colleagues believes.
That's right.
And that vision, by the way, is precisely the opposite of an unalienable right. If government gives you the rights, government can take them away. And today's leftist vision of government is that all of our rights are alienable. It used to be religious liberty had bipartisan support. You look at the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, when it passed Congress, it had overwhelming bipartisan support. Liberal Democrats like Ted Kennedy and Joe Biden voted for the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. It was signed into law by Bill Clinton, a Democrat. Today, every single Democrat in the Senate, all of them, have voted to gut the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. Because for them, the LGBT agenda and the radical transgender agenda is more important than your religious faith. And when I said in that hearing, I said, look, our rights come from God, and you know what? When slavery existed in the United States, it was evil and wrong, even when the law permitted it. The fact that the law permitted it did not make it okay, because slavery was wrong the day the Declaration was signed. It was wrong every day before and every day since. And it took a bloody civil war that cost us 600,000 Americans to expunge that evil from our nation. But if you think rights come from government, then as long as it's legal, there's no problem with slavery. And so I just want to say to you guys, look, people need to hear the truth. And that's what y'all are in the business of doing. And so it's my job to have your back, my job to fight for you, to fight for religious liberty, which has been a passion my entire life, to fight for radio. As you guys know, I'm the author of the AM for Every Vehicle Act. We've passed it through the Senate Commerce Committee, of which I'm the chairman. It has over 60 co-sponsors in the Senate. We will get this passed. Chuck Schumer would not bring it to the floor. We're going to get it passed. We're going to get it to the floor. And we're going to get it done. And I do want to say one final thing, because I'm getting the hook in the back of the room. But I will say there are lots of victories that are happening. We're living in a strange time. There is an energy, there is a vigor in Washington. We've never seen a president hit the ground running with the volume and velocity that this president is doing. So I wake up every morning, I grab my phone, I'm like, what the heck did we do today? And most days I'm celebrating, and some days I'm going, oh, goodness. But we are winning victories that are generational. I want to point one that many of you may not be aware of or understand the details. So on the 4th of July, the president signed the One Big Beautiful Bill. Without exaggeration, that bill has more conservative victories in it than any legislation that has ever been signed into law in American history. There are a lot of elements of that bill that I wrote, but I just want to focus on one, which is school choice. So school choice, I believe, is the civil rights issue of the 21st century. And in the One Big Beautiful Bill is by far the largest and most far-reaching federal school choice provision that has ever passed into law. This is my legislation. And what it does under the law, it'll all go into effect next year, so it is U.S. law, but it doesn't go into effect until 2026. Here's what the law will be. Every taxpayer in America can give up to $1,700 a year in a contribution to a scholarship granting organization in the States. Each taxpayer will get a dollar-for-dollar tax credit for those contributions, not a deduction, a credit. So, Rich, if you write $1,700, you owe Uncle Sam $1,700 less. It means the money is free to you, the taxpayer. Without exaggeration, every taxpayer in America who supports school choice should write $1,700 a year. This is going to unleash tens of billions of dollars for scholarship money in the states, for low-income kids trapped in failing schools, many of whom are African American or Hispanic, and they're in schools where they're not learning, where they're facing violence and drugs and hopelessness. And we're going to see billions of dollars of scholarships, giving them hope, giving them a chance to go attend a Christian school. I'm a proud graduate of Second Baptist High School in Houston, Texas. Giving them a lifeline. And so I will say in particular for your listeners, I want to ask you to do a public service. Make sure every one of your listeners knows as of next year, you can give to these scholarships, and if you're a taxpayer, it's free. Because people have to know to give. And by the way it operates, every taxpayer can get the credit, but to receive the scholarships, the governor of a state must opt in. So we will see, in all likelihood, red states, Texas and Florida, are going to opt in.
Tennessee.
Iowa.
Iowa, but you know what? Blue states, New York and California in all likelihood are not, because their politicians are bought and paid for by the teachers' unions. But let me tell you something beautiful, and we'll wrap on this. You know, often the left is more clever when it comes to politics. You look at something like Obamacare. Obamacare is very clever how it's designed. One aspect of Obamacare is Medicaid expansion. Each state can choose whether to expand Medicaid or not. 37 states have, 13 have not. Texas has not. Under Obamacare, what happens every 2 years when the Texas legislature meets, the hospitals and the doctors, they all come to the legislature and say, you got to expand it, you got to expand it. Look at all this free money from the federal government we're giving away. And it's a constant political pressure to grow government. What we have done with this provision is the exact reverse, which is at first the blue states are going to say no. But then a few years are going to pass. And suddenly parents in New York, who by the way can give, but they got to write a check to a scholarship granting organization in Texas. And parents in New York are going to say, wait a second, why are kids in Florida and Texas getting billions of dollars of scholarships and my kids are ineligible? Yeah. And you're going to suddenly see a constituency in every blue state to go to their leaders and say, we want our kids to have access to these scholarships that we're paying for. And my prediction is within a decade, all 50 states will opt in. And so I believe in this entire bill, the one big beautiful bill. This may be the single most consequential provision. That's right. 10, 20, 30 years from now, we will have millions of kids who've gotten an education, who've gotten hope, who've gotten a future because of the scholarships we've just unlocked. And there's a reason you don't read about it in the New York Times or see it on the 6 o'clock news, which is why the role y'all play is so important. So I'll close the way I started by saying thank you, and I appreciate you.